It's my pleasure to introduce Neil Whiteworth. He is the lead at Ziffo for lab computing. And one of the things that I really love about Neil is that he admits openly that he's been in the informatics industry for 35 years. So he's been in it longer than me, and I thought maybe I was the oldest. So I'm real happy that Neil's here, because I calculate I've been in 31, so he's beaten me. But he enjoys almost every aspect and every element of IT. From the early days of COBOL programming, who remembers COBOL programming? Well, he was at Unilever, to leading teams for the design and the build of global ERP systems, to consulting work across different sites in Asia, Europe, Russia, the US, to founding and scaling IT service businesses. In 2010, Neil was a founding member of Lab Computing startup, and that group was eventually purchased by PerkinElmer. And they formed their lab IT division, and then Neil led that group for some years. It was a great learning experience that sparked the desire to elevate lab computing across the globe. Neil continues his passion of lab compute, now at Ziffo, and talks to us about the need for the life science industry for all of us to value of a focus of lab compute investment and the risk that we face by ignoring this space. So right now, we're going to talk about lab compute. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So yes, I did start a long time ago. My university, I did punch cards. So if anyone can beat that, put your hands up. You know it. So one of the things that I learned over these years was, as the rest of the IT industry moved forward to scalable and focused and processes, a lot of what we do in the labs kind of didn't, right? So that the time that I spent, it's going to move forward, right? Just like that. We need some lab IT up here. I got it.
This right here.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Whew. So I use this term every now and then, the tip of the spear. And so this is a terminology used quite often in military circumstances, where it's that group of people that are the small percentage who are right at the forefront of any operation. And when I think of the spear, that's our whole investment and the weight of what we put into IT. We put investment into the data gathering, into analytics, into visualization, into the UI, into the integrations and the LIMS and the ELN. And all of that is focused at that one point where it really happens, which is right there in the lab. If that doesn't work, none of it works. Because if we're pulling bad data, or if we're not getting our data, or if the data we're getting is invalid in some way, then all the rest of the investment is not getting the value out of it. You're not getting the value out of what you put in. So lab compute to me is the tip of the spear. That's that one place where everything that you put into IT, that's where it really happens. And IT is not just, I mean, we call it lab compute or lab IT, but it's not just about the IT. I mean, the IT is a big part of it. It's the computers, the peripherals, the operating systems, policies, procedures, and all those hundreds of scientific applications that we run, not only to drive the instruments, but also to collect the data, and all the SDMS systems and CDS systems and LIMS and ELNs. But there's also, in the lab, it's a specific environment. In the lab, there's required knowledge that we need in terms of the scientific method, GXP knowledge, if you're supporting IT in the labs, you also need to be able to enter the labs, which means you need to know the safety protocols, you need to understand the protective equipment, you need to have the ability to react in the case of any problems. You might have client-specific SOPs and guidelines and work processes. But also, quite often, infrastructure teams and network teams and that aren't qualified to go into the lab. So it's not unusual for your lab compute people to also be dealing with network problems and connections. And instruments can use old connections that people who come out of university today have never even heard of, like Serial or SCSI. You know, who works with that now? Well, in the lab you do. So there's all that infrastructure side of it that you need to know as well. And on top of all that, well, the elephant in the room, the instruments, right? So it's not unusual for us to come to a problem and finding out what the problem is 80% of solving the problem. We don't know if it's the software, if it's the connection, if it's the way you're using it, or if it's the instrument. There could actually be a problem with the instrument, like UV bulbs or gaskets or whatever, that's creating the bad result, and nothing to do with the software. So that's a whole nother bolus of information that you need to understand when you're in a lab. You need to understand the instruments you're working with. Like this. Boom, there we go. So your poor old scientists, they're sitting in labs and they're struggling with dealing with instrument vendors, dealing with the application software vendors. We've got some of them in the room here today. Dealing with desktop support. They're dealing with infrastructure and info security. And they're dealing with facilities. So it's not unusual for that scientist to have to wrangle all these cats. And it's not unusual for every single one of them to have their own agenda. Not that it's bad, it's absolutely fine. But you know, your software vendor is focused on their software product. They're not always focused on how well it plays with every other product. They're not always focused on how well it integrates into your operating system that might be 10 years old. They're not interested in so much in your custom-built integrations. You know, likewise, the instrument vendor has their own wants and needs, and they might not be even interested in corporate policy or your disaster recovery policy or your security system. Their instrument might just fall over as soon as you put your anti-security hack software on it. And you call them up and they're like, nothing to do with us. So again, every one of these things, any one of these service partners have their own agenda and they're not really all coming together. So this is what scientists are looking for. They're looking for someone to get at, to wrangle all the cats, transform their wants and needs into a solution that saves them time. So they're not spending their time working with all these people. But what do they get? Right? So at a corporate, a senior financial level, VP, C-suite, usually the response is, I already paid for all this. I've paid for the instrument vendor and I've got a warranty for them. So if it's a problem with the instrument, call them. I've bought a desktop. I've bought desktop support from an IT support service. Call them if you've got a problem. I've paid for my software. I've got warranty on my software. I've got a help desk line for my software. Why do I need to pay for this guy when I've already paid for all this? So that's, you know, my view of where a lot of the industry is right now. We are left struggling with dealing with multiple parties in the lab, and the end result is that 74% of life science companies are supporting their lab compute through some sort of shadow IT or staff org. So it's quite normal for companies to be spending twice. They buy IT support And then the lab will have some sort of shadow IT operating, or they'll staff org, or they'll have one of their people in the lab that is their IT go-to guys. They're normally dealing with multiple labs, hundreds of scientists, multiple hundreds of applications, thousands of instruments, and usually they're struggling on a budget that is 1% or less of the total IT spend. So it's absolutely normal for a large pharma spending thousands of millions, or say $1 billion, to spend less than $1 million on supporting the labs. It's absolutely normal. So there's a real mismatch in the spend there, and there's a real problem with our scientists and our labs having to support themselves in a relatively unsupportable situation that is just going to get more difficult over time. I have a real problem with this button. Here we go. So where does it leave us? 74% of life science companies are self-supporting in the labs. 80% if you look at distributed labs, like remote QC labs, like in the Singapores or the offshore places. Virtually all of them are supporting themselves. Most of them still have aged out operating systems. It's not unusual for me to still see Windows 7 in labs. Windows 10 has been out for 8 years, right? You know, this is just absolutely normal. And, you know, aged out operating systems are a huge target of opportunity for cyber risk. Huge target. They're just security patches that are 8 years old are very easy to punch through. Very, very easy. And they've got automated systems. We've got a mismatched spend. Farmers with a $1 billion IT budget will spend $3 million for care and feeding of that in the lab. So again, you're not sharpening the tip of your spear. Everything depends on that, the whole unit. You're spending a lot of money on building and deploying these systems. How much money are you actually spending on supporting them in the lab to make sure you get the value over what you spend? Satisfaction. So America Customer Satisfaction Index for 2022 said most scientists have a satisfaction score of less than 60%. So overwhelmingly, scientists are unhappy with their IT support. Wasted time. A Agilent Lab Manager survey said 73% of scientists listed downtime of instruments as their biggest problem. So downtime of instruments can be a lot of things, but a lot of the time it's IT of those instruments. Physical breakdowns are relatively rare. It's quite often it's the IT that supports it. 90% of IT professionals, this is a study of 2,000 IT professionals, only 1 in 10 said they achieved their strategic goals in terms of cloud, AI, virtualization. And 90% of them said that the complexity of the systems in life sciences and the difficulty and the inertia to move forward in the labs with those systems was the cause of their problem. And you think about your own areas that you're involved in. You know, if you're talking about a LIMS and you want to convert your LIMS from the 20-year-old version you're currently on, you know, getting that out into the labs is probably the biggest problem. Converting all the old metadata, converting all the old master data, getting all your instruments onto the new version, that's going to be the hardest part of it. It's hands and feet out there. And I've already mentioned this. So social engineering and automated systems and advanced AI make cyber hacking into labs relatively easy these days, especially with these old, unpatched, unsecure systems that are just obvious targets. And the average data breach reported by the IBM security is about 4 million. That's the average data breach. So most pharmaceutical companies are spending less on protecting their labs than they would lose with just one breach. And that's pretty sobering when you think about it. I was there when Merck had the non-pitcher incident. They're estimated to have lost $1.4 billion on that. And, all right, enough scaremongering. So in terms of, what should we be looking at? And where should we be going? How am I doing for time, by the way? Oh, good. Okay. Where should we be going? What's the good approach to this? So at the top there, you'll see your platforms, your ELN, your LIMS, your STMS, all your other platforms, and the assets supported. And what I've done is I've created a graphic that breaks it down by strategic, operational, and of course, lab. So if you look at those services that you feel are important to keep in-house, strategic direction, maybe even vendor management, interfaces, you may want to keep all your security in-house so you know how to manage it. This is where you should be looking for a trusted advisor, a strategic partner who has a vision and knows your business. And I won't go into that too much because it's not my thing. In terms of operational application support, so these are your general help desk, your automation, any analysis, off-the-shelf applications, interfaces, all like that. This is where you do see a lot of value from a scalable organisation, a relatively medium to large IT support company that can scale as you scale. And also someone who has a strong investment in future technology. So whoever you're picking as your general IT partner, you want someone who is already there in terms of cloud, AI, chatbots, virtual assistants, because that will be the future of how we support IT. And you need someone who can take you there, who can move with you at the speed you need to move. But what I'm really carving out here is very, very important, is carve out lab support. Please carve out lab support. It's a completely different environment. It's nothing like your general IT. When I talk to people about upgrading their operating system, and they say, how long will it take me to upgrade this lab? And I look at it and I say, okay, we've got to decommission the old PC, we've got to get all the data off it, we've got to archive it, then we've got to back it up, and then we've got to put in the new operating system, and then we've got to install the new application, the new software to drive the instrument, and then we've got to qualify it, and then we've got to run some test runs, and then we might have to calibrate it. Could be about 6 to 8 hours, right? And if you're talking to a general IT person, they're like, what? For one PC, 6 hours? That's ridiculous. I just upgraded 4,000 PCs last night. So the scale is completely different. When you're talking about upgrading these PCs and working on these PCs and fixing problems in the lab, you need to have a fit-for-purpose IT support. They will solve a lot of your problems and give you a lot of improved use of those instruments, better use of your data, better data gathering capability, better use of the IT. In terms of in-lab IT, it's a good idea to look for someone who can also be local, because a lot of the places in lab, you have to actually see it. It's very hard. I know we've learned through COVID to do all the things that couldn't be done remote. Suddenly we figured out how to do them remote. Well, the lab is a little different. It's often that you have to go in there and you have to see it to see what the problem is. Here we go. We're coming to the end. I was told I was right after lunch, so I said I'll try and keep it in a monotone and keep it calm. Everyone could have a nice rest and sleep like that. A couple of my old friends were going to heckle me from the back, but they fell asleep. So we're putting all this investment into supporting those labs, supporting the compute in the labs. It's more than just break fix. I mean, it's common that we've seen many surveys and studies that show that scientists can spend up to 10% of their time doing their own IT support. And that's just a waste of their time, to be honest. So having good break fix in the lab does help them spend more of their time as scientists doing the actual science. So that's a really great thing. But there's more than just that. Having good supported IT in the labs means you gain insight. It's very usual for me to go to a company at the beginning of a transition to a lab compute service, and there is no IT inventory. It's completely normal. That's right, I see a lot of nodding heads out there. To go out there and nobody knows how many PCs we have. Nobody may not even know where they're located, right? I have been at large pharma, which I won't name, where we need to restore a PC and we don't even know where it is. We have to just go walking around to find it. So, you get this insight into what's in your lab. That drives good decisions. Say you want to say, okay, I need to upgrade Softmax Pro. I know exactly how many licenses I have. I know what machines they're on. I know what version they are. And I can make a good decision now about upgrading that software product. Before, I was just guessing. There's a lot of the barriers to change that you remove as well. Sometimes it's, I need to replace all my lace boxes. But, who's going to go to, Dayton, Ohio to replace them all? Well, none of my staff will. They're like, not me. So you've got hands and feet to go out and do a lot of these things. And, the first step to automating data intake and analysis is having a good understanding of what instruments you have, what data they're generating, and where they are, and who's using them, and what science they're even involved in. So, it's going to be very different to work with, just at a high level, small molecule to big, large molecule. That's a huge different type of instruments and huge different type of IT setup. So that's what you get. You get insight. You get sustainability and security. If you're supporting your lab IT ad hoc, whoever's there, whoever can do it, then what's happening most of the time is those things are not being securely backed up, and most of the time they don't have secure cyber protection. Those are the first things that go by the wayside when people have to do it themselves, because that requires a constant, consistent attention every single day to make sure that the backup's running and what we're backing up is verified, and that we have the latest patches and we have the latest security protection. If you don't have a solid lab IT, I guarantee that's not happening in your labs. So that's a big worry. And if you have an IT team dedicated to labs, they will be doing that. I guarantee they will be doing that. And they'll be making sure it's done and recorded. And they'll also be in there for any disaster recovery as well. So they're a key part of bringing that up when a disaster does happen, because they can immediately tell you where the backups are, how to do them, who needs to be involved, etc., etc. And, this is the last bit, but it's kind of important, When you have scientists that work in a reactive IT environment, IT are quite often seen as almost as the enemy, They're there to slow things down. They're there to cause us problems. They go to work worrying about what's going to happen today to ruin my day by IT, right? So if you can bring in a best in practice IT support in your lab, over time they very quickly start seeing your IT support as a partner, someone to enhance their daily activity, someone to help them get to the next level. And you're more than just break fix. You're there to talk to them about where they're going, where their future step is. You know, you want to upgrade this is the path. You want to have this protection, this is how you should implement it. These are the anti-cyber tools that work well in the lab and you should put in. These ones are really bad. Don't put that one in. These are the tools that back up a lab really well. These are the ones that cause more problems. They might be great in the industry, but in a lab they start causing problems. These are the ways that other labs doing the same sort of science as you, these are the problems they suffer from their mPower installations or, you know, from how they run ChemStation. And this is what we've learnt from over there. So IT starts bringing solutions and is proactive and supportive instead of being the problem child. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Is there any questions for Neil?
Anyone still awake? Good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, we have a question.
Oh, we have
Don't get off that
questions.
stage yet.
Didn't get out of me quickly.
All right, Neil. I think everything makes perfect sense. One question I have is, what's your model with Zifo's lab service? Are you actually provide, as you said, local support?
Yes.
Or are you provide more strategic setup, or
No,
both?
we are, so my business group is, that bottom layer. And we do local in-lab support. So primarily. Yep. We currently support, we're customer number 15, I think, now.
Around the globe. That's
Around the
key.
world, that's right.
Any other questions?
I'm well, though.
Well, Ron has one right there, Chris.
Okay, so with lab service support, how detailed do you guys get into the actual operations of the various lab equipment and stuff like that? So, like, say you've got an Empower system, would the members of your support team, like, know everything about that Empower system, including how various configurations were done in it and the way that different analysts are going to be using that equipment, and also recognize the variation that you see between labs for the same types of equipment?
Yeah, good question. So quite often it depends on the company that we're coming into. So some companies have an application management team already who will own the database and the server side of it. And we're usually focused on in the lab. Now, the thing about Empower is that the lace boxes, the acquisition servers, are normally in the labs as well. So we would support them. We would, we provide Empower admins who can actually be the Empower admin for your service as well. And normally, depending on the box that you're using, if it's an Agilent box, then Agilent will come in and do the instrument setup, but it's not unusual for us to do the OQs and the PQs. So we can do the qualification side of it as well. So pretty hands-on. And normally what happens, not just with the Empower side, but with most instruments, normally what we try and do is we try and shadow the vendor on the first install, be whatever it is, like a HPLC or ATCA or whatever you're running. And then we will, following that, we can duplicate that effort ourselves. So you don't always have to bring the vendor in. So that can save hundreds of dollars per call out, because we can also do some basic maintenance as well, like we can change UV bulbs and things like that. So it's not unusual for us to slowly take over some of the repeatable easy fixes to save yourself expensive vendor call outs as well. So yeah, I'm just going to add one. So for example, if you decide you're going to upgrade, right, you don't have to call the vendor out to do all the PQs for the 1,000 lace, the 1,000 HPLCs you have.
We get a lot of pushback from our information security team.
Mm-hmm.
So do you recommend all the lab instruments to be in a separate network? Because as you said, we have like a lot of Windows 7
Yeah.
PCs or Windows 8 PCs, right? So do you recommend a separate network from the corporate network?
Yeah, so what happens is quite often they put a lot of these PCs that don't fit the security, they stick them on a VPN or a separate network. But for me, that's kind of just kicking the can down the road most of the time, because at some point you're going to have to upgrade them. So what we've done with some customers is work out, how do we get them up to the right level? How do we patch those instruments up to the right level? And then how do we have a plan to keep them at that level over time? So yes, you should separate them out of the network, because that limits your risk right now with these highly vulnerable machines. But also you should have a plan of how to get them back on again, because it's going to have to happen sometime.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.